Hello everyone. In today's video I bring you an extraordinary story that will challenge your beliefs and perceptions. We will meet Levi Caldwell, a skeptical professor who never believed in life after death. However, a terrible accident changed everything. He faced death up close and came back with deep revelations about existence that will challenge everything you think you know. What Levi saw on the other side is something you can't miss. So before we begin, be sure to leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any amazing stories like this. Now get ready for a transformative and unforgettable journey. My name is Levi Caldwell. I'm 33 years old, and I'm a literature professor in Austin, Texas. Before I tell you what happened to me, I think it's important that you understand who I was. I say was, because the man I am today is very different from the one who existed before the accident. I've always been a rational, skeptical person. My life revolved around books, the classes I taught, and a fairly predictable routine. I'd wake up early, drink my black coffee without sugar, get in my car, and head to the university. There, I'd spend hours discussing Hemingway, Faulkner, and so many other authors who shaped American literature. In the evening, I'd return home, grade some papers, and prepare the next day's lessons. I was never a religious or spiritual person. To be honest, I would even laugh internally whenever I heard someone talk about life after death or supernatural experiences. To me, we were just matter, and when we died, that was it. Full stop. There was nothing beyond that. My disbelief in anything spiritual was so strong that, even when my students tried to start discussions on the topic in class, I would subtly steer the conversation back to the safe ground of literary analysis. After all, I was a man of reason, of logic. There was no room for mysticism or superstition in my life. I lived in a world of words and ideas, but always with my feet firmly planted on the ground. My mind was too occupied with deadlines, grades, and analysis to worry about deeper existential questions. I believed that life was only what we could see and touch, nothing more. Looking back, I realize I was a man limited by my own convictions. I lived in a comfortable bubble of skepticism, protected by the armor of academia and critical thinking. Little did I know that this bubble was about to burst in a way I could never have imagined. If someone had told me back then that I would be here today, telling this story, I would probably have laughed and dismissed the idea as an absurd fantasy. But life, as I would come to discover, has a peculiar way of challenging our most deeply held certainties. What I'm about to share with you completely changed my perception of reality, the purpose of life, and the nature of existence. It's a journey that began with a terrible accident but took me to places I never imagined existed, a journey that transformed not only my mind but also my soul, if I even believed I had one before all of this happened. Prepare yourself, because what I'm going to tell you might challenge everything you believe about life and death. This is the story of my near-death experience, and how it taught me that there is much more to existence than what our eyes can see or our hands can touch. It was a Wednesday night like any other. I had spent the entire day at the university, teaching classes, advising students, and attending a department meeting that ran longer than expected. I was exhausted, but I still had a pile of papers to grade at home. I got into my car around 9 p.m., the campus parking lot almost empty. I turned on the radio softly, more to keep myself awake than out of interest in the program. The streets of Austin were relatively quiet at that hour, and I was driving on autopilot, my mind still caught up in the tasks waiting for me at home. I should have realized how tired I was. My eyes were heavy, and more than once I caught myself blinking long, struggling to stay focused on the road. But routine and the need to finish my work pushed me to keep going. That's when it happened. I was approaching an intersection, and the light was green for me. I didn't slow down, confident I had the right of way. Suddenly, a flash of headlights filled my peripheral vision. I turned my head sharply to the left and saw an SUV speeding through, ignoring the red light. Time seemed to slow down. I could see the horrified face of the other driver. As surprised as I was by the inevitable impact, My foot slammed on the brake, but it was too late. The screeching of tires on asphalt filled my ears for a brief moment before the deafening crash of the collision. The impact was brutal. I felt my body being violently thrown against the seatbelt, while the airbag exploded into my face with a force that left me dazed. The world spun around me in a blur of twisted metal, shattered glass, and broken plastic. When the car finally stopped spinning, I found myself hanging upside down, held by the seatbelt. The pain was indescribable. Every breath was agony, and I could taste the metallic tang of blood in my mouth. I tried to move, but my body wouldn't respond. The silence that followed was oppressive, interrupted only by the distant sound of approaching sirens and the occasional tinkle of falling glass. I was trapped, unable to move, with the terrifying awareness that my body was gravely injured. In those endless moments, waiting for help to arrive, I faced my own mortality for the first time. Fear gripped me, not just the fear of pain or impending death, but a deeper, more existential fear. What if this was the end? What if all my certainties about the non-existence of life after death were wrong? The sirens grew louder, but my consciousness began to fade. My thoughts turned to my life, to all the things I still wanted to do, to the people I loved. For the first time in years, I found myself doing something that resembled a prayer, not to any specific God, but to any force that might be listening. As the voices of the rescuers drew closer, I felt a strange calm envelop me. The pain was still there, intense and overwhelming, but something inside me seemed to let go. My last conscious memory was of looking at my own hand, covered in blood and shards of glass, and thinking, this can't be the end, it can't end like this. And then, darkness. While the paramedics worked frantically to stabilize me and transport me to the hospital, my mind wandered into the past, reliving long-buried memories. It was as if, faced with the possibility of the end, my brain wanted to review my entire existence. I was born and raised in a small town in rural Texas, the only child of loving but complicated parents. My father, a taciturn and practical man, worked as a mechanic. My mother, on the other hand, was a woman of unstable moods, oscillating between periods of intense creativity and long episodes of deep depression. My childhood was marked by this duality. On the one hand, there was the stability and connection to nature that rural life provided. I vividly remember the endless summers, running through cotton fields, fishing in the creek near our house, gazing at the stars on clear nights unspoiled by light pollution. But the figure that stood out most in my memories was my grandfather, Joshua Caldwell. A tall, thin man with gray hair always tousled by the wind. He was an endless source of stories and wisdom. He was the one who introduced me to the world of books, taking me to the small-town library every week to pick out new volumes. My grandfather had a unique view of the world. He talked about the interconnectedness of all things, about how every action we took had an impact on the universe. At the time, I found it fascinating, even if I didn't fully understand it. He'd tell me, "Levi, my boy, always remember that we are more than just flesh and bone. There's a divine spark in each of us." These happy memories, however, were often overshadowed by the dark episodes at home. As I grew older, my mother's mental health issues became more evident and harder to ignore. There were days when she barely got out of bed, wrapped in a sadness so deep it seemed palpable. At other times, she'd throw herself into grand and unrealistic projects, talking nonstop about plans that never materialized. The impact of this on my life was profound. I learned early on to tread lightly, to read the moods of the adults around me, to become practically invisible when things got tense at home. I developed an instinctive distrust of intense emotions and anything that seemed irrational or out of the ordinary. It was in this environment that my skepticism began to take root. The instability at home drove me to seek refuge in logic, reason, and things I could prove and understand. Books became both my escape and my fortress. I immersed myself in stories and facts, preferring the ordered world of printed pages to the unpredictable chaos of the reality around me. As I entered adolescence, my detachment from any form of spirituality or belief in the supernatural solidified. My grandfather's words about the divine spark started to sound like naive fantasies. I sought scientific explanations for everything, rejecting anything that could not be empirically proven. This attitude served me well academically. I excelled in school, particularly in subjects that required analytical thinking. My teachers encouraged me to pursue an academic career. I distanced myself more and more from my hometown, my parents, and, sadly, even from my grandfather. The years passed, and I built a solid career as a university professor. I earned respect for my methodical and rational approach to literary analysis. But looking back now, I realized that something fundamental was missing. In my pursuit of certainty and logical explanations, I had closed my heart to the mystery and wonder my grandfather had tried so hard to show me. It took a brutal encounter with my own mortality to make me question all the certainties I had built over the years. As I was rushed into surgery, a part of me wondered if perhaps there was more to life than I had allowed myself to believe. What happened next is something I never imagined possible, something that challenged everything I thought I knew about reality, consciousness, and the very nature of existence. I vaguely remember being placed on the stretcher, the fluorescent lights of the hospital corridor flashing quickly overhead as I was wheeled into the operating room. The pain was unbearable, and I drifted in and out of consciousness. Suddenly, something changed. The pain, which had dominated all my senses, simply disappeared. It was as if someone had flipped a switch. In place of the agony, I felt an indescribable lightness, a sense of peace I had never experienced before. That's when I realized. I could see my own body on the operating table. No, this is not a metaphor. I was literally looking down, seeing my bruised and bloodied body lying on the table while the medical team worked frantically around me. It was as if my consciousness, my essence, whatever it is that makes us who we are, had separated from my physical body. The scene before me was surreal. We need to stabilize him fast. The strangest part was that I didn't feel fear. On the contrary, I was consumed by intense curiosity. How was this possible? How could I be seeing and hearing all of this if my brain, my eyes, and my ears were lying there on the table? I tried to move, and I discovered I could. It wasn't a physical movement as we know it, but more like a shifting of consciousness. All I had to do was think about being in a different part of the room, and I was there, instantly. I floated around the operating room, observing every detail with astonishing clarity. I saw the heart monitor blinking, showing my irregular heartbeat. I noticed the focused expressions of the surgeons, the beads of sweat running down their foreheads as they worked to save my life. At one point, I approached one of the doctors and tried to touch him, to speak to him, but my hand, or whatever it was in that state, simply passed through his body. He showed no sign of noticing my presence. It was then that I began to feel something else, a sensation that there was something beyond that room, something calling me. It was as if a gentle light was pulsing at the edge of my awareness, inviting me to explore beyond the physical confines of the hospital. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to stay and watch what happened to my body, but the pull of that light, that sense of peace and welcome, was irresistible. I decided to let myself be carried by it. As I moved away from the operating room, the reality around me began to change. The hospital walls seemed to dissolve, giving way to an environment I couldn't fully describe with words. It was as if I were floating in an infinite space, but at the same time it felt warm and inviting. The light I had sensed before was now everywhere, not blinding, but comforting. Colors I had never seen before danced around me, creating complex and beautiful patterns. There was no longer any sense of time or space as I had known it. That's when I realized I wasn't alone in that incredible place. I felt presences around me, beings of pure light and energy. They didn't have defined forms, but I could feel their consciousness, their compassion, their unconditional love. These presences began to communicate with me, not through words, but through pure thoughts and feelings. They transmitted a sense of welcome, of returning home. It was as if they were saying to me, "Welcome back. We've been waiting for you." At that moment, all my previous certainties, all my skepticism, seemed so small and limited. I was standing before something far greater than I had ever imagined possible, something that defied all the logic and reason I had cultivated throughout my life. A wave of emotion washed over me, a mixture of awe, joy, and a deep sense of belonging. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be, that there was a greater purpose to my existence, something that went far beyond my daily life as a literature professor. The beings of light seemed to understand my confusion and amazement. I sensed that they were ready to guide me, to show me truths I had never considered. And I, Levi Caldwell, the inveterate skeptic, was ready to learn. Little did I know that what was to come would forever change my understanding of life, death, and the universe itself. As I floated in that ethereal space, surrounded by colors and energies that defied my comprehension, the presences around me began to take on more defined forms. They weren't exactly human shapes, but rather concentrations of light and energy pulsing with life and consciousness. I mentally referred to them as beings of light, for lack of better words to describe them. The most surprising thing was that, even without physical eyes, I could see these beings with a clarity I had never experienced before. Each of them radiated a unique aura, with colors and patterns that seemed to tell stories of unimaginable ages and wisdom beyond human understanding. One of these beings approached me. There was no movement in the physical sense, but suddenly its presence was closer, more intense. I felt a wave of love and compassion so pure and powerful that, if I still had a physical body, I would have surely fallen to my knees. It was an unconditional love, without judgment, that accepted every part of me, including my flaws and doubts. Then, something extraordinary happened. The being of light began to communicate with me. It wasn't words in the conventional sense, but a direct transmission of thoughts and emotions. It was as if each concept, each idea, was planted directly into my consciousness, blossoming into instant understanding. "Welcome, Levi." I felt more than heard. "Do not be afraid, you are safe here." I tried to respond, to form words, but I discovered it wasn't necessary. My thoughts, my questions, my confusion, everything was immediately understood by the being of light. "Yes, this is real," came the response to my unspoken doubts. "What you are experiencing goes beyond the physical reality you know. We are here to guide you, to show you truths that your earthly mind could not fully comprehend." Then, to my amazement, the being of light showed me something that left me breathless, though I no longer had lungs to breathe at that moment. I saw the operating room again, but this time from a completely different perspective. I saw the doctors working on my body, but now I could perceive something more. Around each member of the medical team, there was a subtle aura, and thin strands of light connected them to the beings of light that were with me in that ethereal plane. "Observe," the being said. "See how we are connected to them, guiding their hands, inspiring their thoughts. What you call intuition or sudden insight is often our subtle guidance." I was amazed to see how the beings of light worked through the doctors, not controlling their actions but offering small impulses of inspiration and clarity. It was a delicate dance between the physical and the spiritual, a collaboration that transcended the limits of human understanding. "But why?" I asked without words. "Why do you do this?" The answer came as a wave of understanding. "Because you are all part of us, just as we are part of you. There is no real separation. What you call life and death are merely transitions in a larger continuum of existence." This revelation hit me with full force. My entire life, I had seen the world as something purely physical, governed only by the laws of nature that we could observe and measure. But now, everything is connected in an intricate tapestry of cause and effect that extends far beyond what our physical senses can perceive. The beings of light continued to show me more. I saw how they were not limited by time or space as we know them. They could be in multiple places simultaneously, offering guidance and support to countless incarnated and disembodied souls. You too have this potential, I felt them telling me. In fact, you are much more than you think you are. The physical form you know is just a small part of who you truly are. This idea was both exhilarating and terrifying. It meant that everything I believed about myself, about reality, about the purpose of life, needed to be reevaluated. As I absorbed these revelations, I felt a deep humility wash over me. My entire academic life, all the knowledge I had accumulated and taken such pride in, now seemed so limited in comparison to the vastness of what was being revealed. But along with this humility came a sense of expansion, of infinite possibilities. If this were true, if we were truly far more vast and powerful than we realized, then what else could be possible? The beings of light seemed to smile, though they had no faces in the conventional sense, at my growing awareness. Now you are beginning to see, I felt them say. But there is much more to learn. Are you ready to continue your journey? Without hesitation, without fear, I responded with all my being. Yes, I am ready. And so, guided by the beings of light, I prepared to dive even deeper into the mysteries of the universe and existence. As my journey with the beings of light continued, I felt we were approaching a crucial revelation. The energy around me shifted, becoming more intense, more focused. It was as if the universe itself was preparing to share one of its deepest secrets. I was enveloped by a vision so vast and complex that, even now, I struggle to describe it adequately with human words. It was as if I could see the entire fabric of existence at once, past, present, and future, interwoven into an infinitely complex and beautiful pattern. What was shown to me is that the afterlife, and as most people conceive of it, is an extremely limited understanding of the true nature of existence. There is no simple linear progression from life to death and then some static afterlife. Instead, there is a continuum of consciousness, an eternal flow of experiences and evolution. Observe. The beings of light guided me. How each soul is a unique expression of the whole, a focus of consciousness in constant evolution. I then saw how each physical life, human or otherwise, is just a chapter in a much larger story. Each incarnation is an opportunity for learning, growth, and expansion of consciousness. Physical death is not an end, but a transition, a temporary return to a more expanded state of being. What shocked me deeply was realizing that many of the religious and spiritual conceptions humans have about the afterlife are, at best, simplified metaphors, and at worst, complete distortions of the truth. There is no eternal heaven or hell as fixed places of reward or punishment. Instead, there are states of consciousness that we can experience based on our choices and level of spiritual evolution. Hell, I was shown, is more of a state of misalignment with our true nature, a temporary condition that serves as a catalyst for growth. Similarly, there is no external judgment from some distant deity. Instead, when we return to the non-physical state after a life, we ourselves review our experiences, lessons, and choices. It is a process of deep self-reflection, guided by more evolved beings, but fundamentally driven by our own consciousness. Understand, the beings of light communicated, that the fundamental purpose of all existence is the expansion of love and consciousness. Each life, each experience, each choice is an opportunity to express and understand more deeply the unconditional love that is the essence of all that exists. This revelation hit me with overwhelming force. My entire belief system, or lack thereof, was being completely rewritten. I, who had always dismissed any notion of an afterlife as fantasy or wishful thinking, was now face to face with a reality far beyond anything I could have imagined. I saw how love, not the romantic or familial love we know on earth, but a cosmic, unconditional, all-encompassing love, is the driving force of all existence. It is the fabric from which reality is made, the energy that permeates and connects everything. The beings of light showed me how every act of genuine love, every moment of compassion and kindness, reverberates throughout the cosmos, contributing to the collective evolution of consciousness. And the opposite is also true. Acts of hate, fear, and separation create dissonance and misalignment, though even these eventually serve as catalysts for greater growth and understanding. Remember, Levi, I felt them say, when you return, that the only thing that truly matters, the only thing you truly carry with you from one life to another. While these things had their place and purpose, they were secondary to the true purpose of existence. The afterlife, I now understood, was not a final destination, but a continuation of our eternal journey of evolution and expansion. Each physical life is like a mission, an opportunity to learn specific lessons, to overcome unique challenges, to experience different aspects of love and consciousness. The beings of light continued to show me how this process works. I saw souls voluntarily choosing challenging incarnations, knowing that growth would come through overcoming obstacles. I saw others opting for supportive roles, dedicating entire lives to helping other souls on their journeys. Understand, they told me, that there is no real hierarchy in this process. Every role, every life, every experience holds equal value in the eyes of the universe. The beggar on the street may be on a mission as important as that of a world leader. This idea made me reflect on all the times I had judged people based on their apparent achievements or social status. Now I saw how limited and superficial that view had been. Another shocking revelation was the understanding that we are not limited to human experiences. I saw souls incarnating in other forms of life, on other planets, in dimensions my human mind could barely comprehend. The diversity and vastness of possible experiences were simply staggering. Reality is far more vast and wonderful than you can imagine in your current form, the beings of light assured me. Each life, each form, each experience is a unique opportunity to explore different aspects of existence. Then, they showed me something that deeply moved me. I saw how, between lives, souls gather in affinity groups, spiritual families, so to speak. These souls often incarnate together, were not accidental, but carefully planned for our mutual growth. Look, the beings of light guided me. How every interaction, every relationship, even conflict, is an opportunity for learning and growth. There are no accidents in the universe, only lessons and opportunities disguised. This understanding gave me a new perspective on all the challenges and difficulties I had faced in my life. Now I saw how each obstacle, each disappointment, each loss had a greater purpose. They were all part of my spiritual growth plan that I had helped create before incarnating. The beings of light then showed me something that made me especially reflective. I saw how, after each life, we review our experiences not only from the perspective of our own actions and choices, but also from the impact we had on others. I saw souls experiencing the consequences of their actions, not only in themselves, but in all those who had been affected by them. This is the true karma, they explained. It is not punishment or reward, but a natural process of cause and effect, of learning through direct experience. I then understood that true salvation, or enlightenment, does not come from blindly following rules or religious dogma, but from a deep understanding and genuine expression of unconditional love. I saw how the most evolved souls were not necessarily the most holy by earthly standards, but those who had learned to love more deeply, to forgive more fully, to understand more compassionately. Remember, Levi, I felt the beings of light say with an intensity that pierced the core of my being, when you return, that every moment of your life is precious. Every interaction, every choice, even every thought is an opportunity to grow in love and consciousness. Do not waste these opportunities with fear, anger, or indifference. Live fully, love deeply, forgive completely. As I absorbed these revelations, I felt a profound transformation occurring within me. My entire perspective on life, death, and the purpose of existence was being completely rewritten. I knew that, if I had the chance to return, nothing would ever be the same. And then, I felt a new shift in the energy around me. The beings of light seemed to be preparing to show me something more, something even more personal and profound. Little did I know that I was about to have an encounter that would change everything once again. As I was still processing the shocking revelations about the nature of life after death, I felt a subtle change in the energy around me. It was as if the very fabric of reality was reconfiguring itself, preparing for yet another transformative experience. Suddenly, amid the ethereal light that surrounded me, a familiar form began to materialize. It wasn't a physical apparition in the traditional sense, but a concentration of energy and consciousness that I instantly recognized. It was my grandfather, Joshua Caldwell. Seeing my grandfather in that state was an overwhelming experience. He didn't appear as the elderly man I remembered from my childhood, but as a younger, more vibrant version of himself. His eyes shone with a wisdom and love that transcended anything I had ever experienced on earth. "Levi, my boy." His voice resonated in my consciousness, not as sound, but as pure emotion and understanding. "It's good to see you here," though a little earlier than expected. I was flooded with a wave of emotions: joy, nostalgia, love, and a deep sense of reconnection. It was as if a part of me that I hadn't realized was missing had suddenly been restored. "Grandpa," I responded without words, "I've missed you so much. There's so much I want to tell you, so much I want to ask." He smiled, a smile that seemed to contain all the love in the universe. "I know, Levi, and we will have time for all of that. But first, there's something important we need to do together." With a gesture that seemed to encompass all of existence, my grandfather began what I can only describe as a life review. But it wasn't just a recap of past events. It was a multi-dimensional experience where every moment of my life was relived, not only from my point of view, but from everyone who had been affected by my actions and choices. I saw my childhood through new eyes. Moments I had long forgotten resurfaced with crystal clarity, shaped who you became. There are no accidents, in Levi. Every challenge, every joy, every pain had a purpose. We moved through my adolescence and adulthood. I saw my struggles to fit in, my pursuit of knowledge and academic recognition. I saw how my skepticism and obsession with logic and reason had, in part, been armor to protect a wounded and confused heart. The most impactful part was seeing how my actions and choices had affected others. I saw moments when a kind word or act of kindness had created ripples of positivity in someone's life. But I also saw moments when my indifference or judgment had caused pain and disappointment. "Do not judge yourself harshly," my grandfather advised, sensing my discomfort. "Remember, every experience is an opportunity for learning and growth." Then, we arrived at the most recent moments of my life. I saw my daily routine as a professor, my relationships, my struggles and achievements. And finally, we came to the car accident that had brought me to this state. "See how everything is interconnected," my grandfather explained. "Every choice, every encounter, every challenge has led you to this moment, and now you have a choice to make." I instinctively knew what he was talking about, but possibilities and potentials based on my choices. I saw versions of myself living lives of purpose and meaning, sharing the truths I had learned here. But I also saw versions where I became lost again in routine and skepticism, forgetting the precious lessons of this experience. "The choice is yours, Levi," my grandfather said with a gentle smile. "But remember, no matter what you choose, you are never truly separated from us. We are always with you, guiding and supporting you, even when you do not realize it." I remained silent for a moment, absorbing everything I had experienced. The life review had shown me not only who I was, but who I could become. It had shown me the power of love, compassion, and connection. "Thank you, Grandpa," I finally said, feeling a gratitude that words could not adequately express. "For everything. for being here with me now, and for all the lessons you tried to teach me when I was too young to fully understand. My grandfather embraced me in a hug that transcended the physical. It was a merging of souls, a sharing of love and understanding that went beyond anything I had ever experienced. "Always remember, Levi," he said, his voice echoing through my entire being, "that love is the most powerful force in the universe. It is what connects us, what guides us, what helps us grow. No matter what you choose, take this love with you." With these words, I knew I was ready to make my choice. A choice that would change not only the course of my life, but potentially the lives of everyone I would touch from that moment on. And so, with a heart full of love and a mind expanded by new possibilities, I prepared for the next phase of my journey. After the emotional encounter with my grandfather and the profound life review, I found myself facing the most important decision I had ever had to make: to return to the physical world or continue my journey in the spiritual realm. It was a decision that weighed on me with an intensity I had never experienced before. On one hand, the peace and love I felt in this spiritual realm were indescribable. Here I was free from the limitations and sufferings of the physical world. I could feel a direct connection to the universe, to the unconditional love that permeates all existence. Part of me wanted to stay in this state of bliss, to continue exploring the cosmic truths being revealed to me. On the other hand, the visions of the future my grandfather had shown me, the possibilities of a life filled with purpose and meaning, called to me. I could feel the potential to make a real difference in the world, to share the truths I had learned here. As I pondered, the beings of light approached me once again. Their presence was comforting, their wisdom palpable. "Levi," I felt them communicate, "understand that there is no wrong choice here. Each path offers opportunities for growth and evolution. But consider this: the lessons you have learned here are not just for you. They have the potential to touch and transform many lives." Those words resonated deeply within me. I remembered all the times in my life when I had felt lost, when I had questioned the purpose of my existence. How many others were going through that now? How many could benefit from the knowledge and perspective I now possessed? My grandfather, still by my side, added his own wisdom. "Remember, my son, that each life is a precious opportunity. Returning to the physical form is not a step backward, but a chance to apply everything you've learned here in a new context." As I absorbed these words, I began to feel a shift in my perspective. What had once seemed like a choice between remaining in a state of happiness or returning to suffering, now revealed itself as something much deeper. Returning would not be a renunciation of the peace and love I had experienced here, but an opportunity to bring that peace and love back into the physical world. "But," I asked, "what if I forget? What if, upon returning, I lose all this understanding, all this love?" The beings of light enveloped me in a wave of understanding and reassurance. "You will not forget completely," they assured me. "Though the specific memories of this experience may fade, the essence of what you have learned will remain with you. It will be imprinted on your soul, influencing your choices and actions, even if you are not consciously aware of it." My grandfather added with a smile full of love, "And we will always be with you, Levi, guiding, inspiring, supporting. You are never truly alone." At that moment, I felt a certainty growing within me, a realization that my journey on earth was not yet complete, that there was more for me to learn, more for me to share, more love to give and receive. "I want to go back," I finally said, my decision crystallizing with a clarity that surprised me. "I want to take what I've learned here back to the physical world. I want to make the difference I know I can make." As soon as I made that decision, I felt a shift in the energy around me. It was as if the entire universe was responding to my choice, aligning to support my journey back. The beings of light seemed to radiate approval and love. "Your decision is courageous and noble, Levi," I felt them communicate. "Returning to the physical plane with the knowledge you've gained here is not an easy task. There will be challenges, doubts, and moments of forgetfulness. But always remember, You carry within you the truth you've experienced here. My grandfather approached, his presence radiating a love that enveloped me completely. I am proud of you, my grandson, he said, his voice resonating in my soul. Remember that every act of kindness, every moment of understanding, every expression of genuine love you share will be a victory not only for you but for all consciousness. Then, to my surprise, the beings of light and my grandfather began to give me what I can only describe as instructions for my return. When you return, they explained, the specific memories of this experience may fade quickly. It is the nature of the veil that separates the physical and spiritual realms. But do not despair. The essence of what you have learned will remain with you. They advised me that, as soon as possible after waking, I should write down or record everything I could remember. The first hours will be crucial, my grandfather emphasized. Even if it seems confusing or meaningless, record everything. In time, understanding will come. The beings of light continued. You will face challenges as you try to integrate this experience into your daily life. There will be those who will not understand, who will doubt. Do not be discouraged. The truth you carry does not need external validation. They instructed me to find ways to incorporate what I had learned into my daily life. Every interaction is an opportunity to express unconditional love, they said. Every challenge is a chance to practice compassion and forgiveness for others and for yourself. My grandfather added, use your position as a teacher, Levi. You have a platform to inspire and educate. Do not be afraid to challenge conventional thinking, to encourage your students to consider possibilities beyond the material world. As I absorbed this advice, I felt a mix of emotions, excitement, apprehension, determination. I knew the path ahead would not be easy, but I also knew it would be incredibly meaningful. It is time, the beings of light announced softly. I could feel a kind of pull beginning to draw me back to my physical body. My grandfather hugged me one last time, a hug that seemed to contain all the love in the universe. Always remember, Levi, he said, you are so much more than your physical body, so much more than your mind. You are an eternal expression of divine love. Carry that truth with you. With one last look of gratitude at the beings of light and my grandfather, I surrendered to the process of returning. The bright light around me began to fade, and I felt as if I were falling, or perhaps floating, back into the density of the physical world. As I approached my body, I began to feel physical sensations again, pain, discomfort, the weight of matter. For a moment, I hesitated. Was it really better to return to this limited state? But then I remembered everything I had learned, my mission, the potential to make a difference. With one final wave of determination, I plunged back into physical consciousness. The transition was abrupt and disorienting. Suddenly, I was back in my injured body, lying in a hospital bed. The pain was intense, and for a moment I felt overwhelmed by the density and limitation of the physical world. But then, amidst the confusion and discomfort, I felt a wave of love envelop me. It wasn't as intense as in the spiritual realm, but it was definitely there, a gentle reminder of the greater truth I had experienced. I slowly opened my eyes, blinking against the fluorescent light in the hospital room. A nurse was by my side, adjusting something on my monitor. When she noticed I was awake, her eyes widened in surprise. "Doctor," she called, her voice a mix of shock and joy. "He's awake. Mr. Caldwell is awake." As the room suddenly filled with activity, doctors entering, machines beeping, excited voices discussing my miraculous eye state, I clung tightly to the memory of what I had experienced. I knew I needed to record everything I could before the memories began to fade. "Paper," I managed to murmur, my voice hoarse from disuse. "Please, I need paper and a pen." The nurse looked confused but quickly fulfilled my request. With trembling hands, I began to write furiously, trying to capture every detail, every insight, every emotion of my journey beyond life. As I wrote, I felt a growing determination inside me. I had returned for a reason. I had a mission to fulfill, truths to share, love to express. My journey back to life was only beginning, and I knew that nothing would be the same again. The world around me might appear unchanged, but I had been fundamentally transformed. And with this change came the promise of a new way of living, of loving, of being. I looked out the hospital window, watching the sun rise on the horizon. A new day was beginning, not just for the world, but for me. And I was ready to embrace it with all the love and wisdom I had brought back with me from the other side. The days that followed my return were an emotional and physical roller coaster. Physically, my body was in agony. The fractures, bruises, and internal injuries from the car accident required a slow and painful recovery. Every movement was a challenge, every breath a reminder of the fragility of physical existence. But mentally and spiritually, I was in a state of simultaneous euphoria and confusion. The memories of my experience beyond physical life were intense and vivid, yet elusive. It was like trying to hold water in my hands. The more I tried to grasp them, the more they seemed to slip away. In the first few days, I spent every conscious moment writing feverishly. I filled entire notebooks with detailed descriptions of the beings of light, the revelations about the afterlife, and my encounter with my grandfather. I described the sensations, the emotions, the profound understandings I had experienced. As I wrote, I realized I was struggling to translate the experience into words. How could I describe colors that don't exist in the visible spectrum? How could I explain sensations that transcend the five senses? How could I convey the depth of the unconditional love I had experienced? But I persisted, knowing that every word I managed to capture was precious. Even if I couldn't convey the entirety of the experience, every fragment I preserved was a seed of truth that could blossom later. The doctors and nurses watched me with a mix of awe and concern. From a medical perspective, my recovery was remarkable, almost miraculous. Injuries that should have taken months to heal were showing signs of improvement in days. It must be the adrenaline, I heard one doctor murmur to another. Or maybe some kind of psychosomatic response to the trauma. I smiled internally, knowing that the true reason lay beyond their current understanding. The healing energy I had experienced in the spiritual realm was still reverberating through my being, accelerating my recovery in ways science couldn't fully explain yet. As the days passed and my condition improved, I began to receive visitors, colleagues from the university, some students, concerned friends. Their reactions to my change were varied and fascinating to observe. Some immediately noticed that something was different. "There's something in your eyes, Levi," said my colleague Sarah, a psychology professor, a piece I've never seen before. Others seemed uncomfortable with my new perspective. When I tried to share glimpses of my experience with a colleague from the science department, he quickly changed the subject, clearly uneasy with anything that challenged his materialistic view of the world. But it was my students who surprised me the most. When a few of them came to visit, I felt an openness, a genuine curiosity that gave me hope. They asked deep questions, not content with superficial answers. Professor Caldwell asked a student named Emily, "Has this changed your view on the purpose of life?" Her question caught me off guard, not because of its depth, but because of its synchronicity. It was exactly what I had been contemplating at that moment: how to integrate what I had learned into my daily life, how to fulfill the mission I had accepted. "Emily," I replied, choosing my words carefully. "What I experienced showed me that the purpose of life is much broader, and at the same time much simpler than we imagine. It's about love, growth, and connection. Every interaction, every choice, every moment is an opportunity to express love and expand our consciousness." I saw her eyes widen in understanding, a spark of recognition igniting. In that moment, I felt I was beginning to fulfill my mission, even while lying in a hospital bed. As my recovery progressed, I began planning my return to normal life, but I knew nothing would ever truly be normal again. How could it be after what I had experienced? I started visualizing how I could incorporate the truths I had learned into my classes, into my daily interactions, into every aspect of my life. It wouldn't be easy. I knew I would face skepticism, ridicule, maybe even hostility. But I also knew that the potential for positive impact was immense. One night, as I gazed out the hospital window at the stars, I once again felt that deep connection to the universe I had experienced on the other side, and with it came a renewed certainty of my mission. I accept, I whispered to the night sky. I accept the responsibility to share what I've learned, to live with love and compassion, to be a beacon of light for those seeking deeper meaning. In that moment, it felt as though the entire universe responded to my commitment. A wave of energy coursed through my body, not as intense as in the spiritual realm, but undeniably real. As I prepared for sleep, I made a silent promise to myself, to the beings of light, to my grandfather, and to everyone I would encounter from that moment forward. I would live each day with purpose, with love, and with the expanded awareness I had gained. My life would be a testament to the truths I had experienced, an invitation for others to explore the depths of their own existence. The road ahead would be challenging, I knew, but it would also be incredibly rewarding. And I was ready to take the first step on this new journey, carrying with me the love and wisdom of the other side. Weeks passed, and finally, the day of my hospital discharge arrived. As I prepared to leave the room that had been my temporary home, I reflected on the incredible journey I had experienced. It wasn't just my body that had healed. My soul had undergone a profound transformation. As I walked out of the hospital, the world around me seemed both familiar and entirely new. The colors appeared more vibrant, the sounds richer, and I could feel an energy pulsating through everything, a tangible reminder of the interconnectedness I had experienced in the spiritual realm. My return to everyday life was gradual. I spent a few weeks at home, regaining my physical strength and, more importantly, integrating my near-death experience into my new reality. Each morning, I revisited my writings, refining and expanding my memories, searching for ways to translate the cosmic truths I had experienced into language and actions that could be understood and applied in the physical world. When I finally returned to the university, it was with a renewed sense of purpose. I stepped into my classroom for the first time since the accident, and I could feel the change immediately. The students noticed it too. There was something different about Professor Caldwell. "A welcome back," I began, my voice carrying a new depth of emotion. "Before we dive into our regular schedule, I'd like to share something with you. My recent experience taught me that there is so much more to life and literature than just analysis and critique. There's a dimension of meaning and connection that we often overlook in our pursuit of academic knowledge." I saw eyes widen, eyebrows raise. Some students exchanged confused looks, while others leaned forward, intrigued. "From today onward," I continued, "and we're going to explore not just what authors wrote, but why they wrote it. We'll seek the humanity behind the words, the universal search for meaning and connection that drives all great literature." In the days and weeks that followed, I transformed my teaching approach. Instead of focusing solely on literary analysis, I began incorporating discussions about consciousness, spirituality, and the broader purpose of human existence. I used the texts we studied as starting points to explore deeper questions about the nature of reality and our place in it. To my surprise and delight, most of the students responded enthusiastically. They seemed thirsty for this kind of meaningful discussion, eager to explore dimensions of themselves and the world that had been neglected in their education up until then. Of course, not everyone welcomed this change. Some faculty members expressed concern about what they saw as a deviation from traditional academic methods. Others openly questioned my sanity, suggesting that the trauma of the accident had affected my judgment. But I remained steadfast. I knew, with a certainty that came from the core of my being, that I was on the right path. Every time I saw a light of understanding ignite in a student's eyes, every time a classroom discussion led to a profound insight about the nature of existence, I felt that I was fulfilling my mission. Outside the classroom, I also sought ways to share my experience and the truths I had learned. I began giving community talks about expanded consciousness and the multidimensional nature of reality. I started a weekly discussion group open to anyone interested in exploring spiritual and existential questions. As my new approach gained attention, I received invitations to speak at conferences and even to write a book about my experience. I embraced these opportunities, seeing them as chances to spread the message of love, connection, and purpose that I had brought back with me from the other side. But not everything was easy. There were days when the density of the physical world felt oppressive, when I longed for the clarity and peace I had experienced in the spiritual realm. There were moments of doubt when the enormity of my mission felt overwhelming. In those moments, I remembered the words of the beings of light and my grandfather. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and reconnected with that feeling of unconditional love and divine purpose. And each time, I found the strength to keep going. One of the most profound changes in my life was the way I began to see and interact with others. Where I had once often judged or dismissed people based on their beliefs or behaviors, I now saw each individual as a unique expression of the divine, each on their own journey of learning and growth. This new perspective transformed my relationships. I became more patient, more compassionate, more open to different points of view. Even when I disagreed with someone, I could do so with love and respect, recognizing that our differences were opportunities for mutual learning. As months turned into years, I saw the impact of my transformation spread in ever-widening circles. Former students wrote to me, sharing how our classroom discussions had changed their lives, inspiring them to seek deeper purpose. Colleagues who had initially been skeptical began to open up to new possibilities, with some even seeking their own spiritual experiences. But perhaps the most significant change was within myself. Every day, I strived to live in accordance with the truths I had experienced on the other side. I practiced unconditional love, sought beauty in every moment, and cultivated expanded awareness in all my interactions. It wasn't always easy. There were challenges, setbacks, moments of doubt. But through it all, I kept the flame of truth I had brought with me alive. And with every obstacle overcome, every heart touched, every mind opened to new possibilities, I knew I was fulfilling my purpose. Looking back at the man I was before the accident, skeptical, focused only on the material world, disconnected from any sense of greater purpose, I can hardly believe the transformation that took place. That near-death experience wasn't just an isolated event in my life. It was a rebirth, the beginning of a continuous journey of discovery and growth. Now, years later, I continue my mission with the same passion and dedication as on the first day. I know there is still much to learn, much to experience, and much love to share. But I also know with a certainty that comes from the deepest part of my being that I am on the right path. Each day is a new opportunity to live the truths I've learned, to be a beacon of light and love in the world. And though I sometimes still miss that realm of pure light and unconditional love, I now understand that my true home is here, in this moment, in this place, making the difference I am meant to make. My near-death experience showed me that life is much more than our temporary physical existence. It is an eternal journey of growth, love, and the expansion of consciousness, and each of us has a vital role to play in this great cosmic dance. So, every morning, I wake up with renewed gratitude and purpose. I look at the world with eyes open not only to its physical beauty, but to the miracle of existence itself. And I recommit to living each moment fully, to loving unconditionally, and to continuing to share the truths I've learned with all those who are ready to listen. Because now I know, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that each of us is an eternal light, a unique expression of divine love. And our mission, in the end, is simple: to shine that light as brightly as we can, illuminating the way for others as we continue our own journey back home. If you enjoyed this beautiful spiritual testimony, leave a like, share your thoughts in the comments, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to activate the notification bell to watch each new video and help us spread this message to more people. See you next time.